knowledge, transcendental knowledge. So what is real knowledge? And what is that knowledge which will help us to end the sufferings of the material world? It's a logical observation that we can see that we are increasing in knowledge. As society is progressing, we are making great advancement in technology and science, so many different things. However, we can understand just by observing that people are less happy. People are more and more disconnected from each other. They're more connected on the internet, more disconnected from each other. Anxiety, depression, mental illness, all these things are increasing day by day. So although we are advancing in material knowledge due to a lack of spiritual knowledge, people are delving deeper and deeper into states of darkness, states of sadness, states of bewilderment, confusion, and they're unable to maintain and form good relationships. So this is an epidemic, especially in more advanced countries. The United States has some of the leading problems in mental health, anxiety, depression, and so forth. I spent about 5 months in India this year and late last year, and one thing I was observing was they have their fair share of problems also, but people are generally more, they have better relationships with each other, that's for sure. Families are closer. So all of these problems of human unhappiness can be solved if one is aware of their constitutional position and actually has transcendental knowledge, if they understand the spiritual constitution of the living entity. So I'll say this and to begin this off. We're going to talk about the 4th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Transcendental Knowledge, today. Religion or spirituality is part of human society. We can observe that throughout history and through all cultures, there's some form of religion. There's some form of spiritual practice or religious practice or ceremonial practices. And one can say, what about now? There's so many people who don't have their religious practices. They do still have their religious practices of watching football and doing so many different, they have their television religious practices, or they do things religiously. And so in this way, people have a tendency to practice a religion, to follow a higher authority, to follow a process. Science is such a religion nowadays. You have their priests. And even though so many things science says they change in a few years, still people are dead set on following them. And even within the scientific community, it's well known amongst scientists that if you challenge the status quo, you'll be ostracized from that scientific community. Just like our Drutakarma Prabhu, Michael Cremo. He's a leading archaeologist, although he's not favored by the mainstream archaeology because he's made discoveries that prove human antiquity, prove that the human race is much older than what the common mainstream archaeologists are saying. So when I was a child, I was raised in the Catholic Church, and I was happy. I was like, yes, I love God, and I love Jesus, and still do. But one day I discovered that my friend went to a different church, and they had a different set of beliefs. And I said, whoa, wait a minute now. And he said, actually, my church is the right church, and your church is the wrong church. And because you go to that church, you know where you're going to go. And I was really, wait a minute. You're telling me there's other spiritual beliefs out there? And then, well, how do I know mine is right? And, you ask that question. They say, well, they have their answers. And then you start to question them because their answers aren't very good. Because we said it's right. That's why. And you're a fortunate one. You were born in the right place. So you're going to go to the good place. And so I was very disturbed by this concept that there's different religions, that there's different spiritual paths. And I thought, well, if there's different spiritual paths, then none of them could be right. That was kind of my conclusion, even as a little child, because that would mean that, everybody's making their own up. There's so many different, it's influenced by material. There's no absolute spiritual authority. And so I was disturbed. And I went through that kind of crisis of faith at like 11 years old. And then at around 14 years old, I started to kind of get into meditation and like, rather than just believing spiritual life and believing some religion, some dogma, I decided that I want to have a spiritual experience. This is a different thing altogether. Rather than having a belief system that I believe and I'm a Christian, I'm a Hindu, I'm a Catholic, I'm a Jew, whatever you say you are, actually you're not that. You're a spiritual being, you're not this body. And so I kind of decided that the only real spiritual path is that which is going to give you a spiritual experience. So when I was about 15, I came across the Bhagavad Gita as it is, by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, his translation of the Bhagavad Gita and his commentaries. And I was quite amazed because I was presented with, at that time, what appeared to be absolute knowledge in a non-sectarian way. Rather than a religious system, I was presented with a scientific presentation on what is spiritual life and how to have a spiritual experience, which is really what I wanted because I started to become bored with the mundane life. I was from a very small town. We didn't have very much distraction there. My highest form of entertainment as a child was walking around in the desert for hours and hours. Very small town. So, I thought a lot, and I thought, well, I want to have some type of experience. And I began to read, different things, reading about the Buddha and, enlightenment sounds pretty fun. Ending of suffering, that sounds pretty cool. And so the Bhagavad Gita presents real religion as it is coming from God. It says, Evam paramparo praptam imam rajasahovadu sakalena hamhata yogo nasta parantapaha. And Krishna is explaining to his friend Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita that this transcendental science, this spiritual scientific knowledge of how to understand oneself is coming down in a line of disciplic succession from time immemorial. And saintly kings, Raj Rishis, back in that day, 5,000 years ago, kings were also saintly people. Saintly kings understood it in that way. But in due course of time, that succession was broken, and the knowledge as it is appears to be lost. So that knowledge of what is our position, what is this spiritual science, becomes lost. And when that knowledge becomes lost, that's when you see this fragmentation, all these different religious groups saying, I'm right and you're wrong. And rather than holding on to the scientific principles behind what makes a religion, they're holding on to the rituals, the clothes, the dress, the names, the language, and they're holding on to those things as a way to feel themselves right, feel themselves safe, as a false sense of security, but not actually having a spiritual experience. And it's not that spiritual experience isn't talked about in all practices. It's talked about in the Bible. There are the fruits of the Spirit, humility, kindness, so forth. But we want to see those fully manifest in a person who's actually pursuing a spiritual life. And then after that, Krishna says, that very ancient science of the relationship with the Supreme. So this very ancient science of your relationship with the Supreme. You see, this is something very special. If there's a Supreme, if God exists, we likely have some relationship with him. At least we came from him. If you believe that there is such a being, a supreme source. That very ancient science of the relationship with the Supreme is being told to you by me. And Krishna says, because you're non-envious of me and you're my friend, therefore you can understand the mystery of this science. So there's a qualification to understand the science, that one is non-envious. So the word religion comes from the Latin word religare, meaning to relink or to reconnect. So like this word ligament, that means connective tissues, right, in the body. So religare means to reconnect with God. So innately in that word, there's a sense that in this world we've forgotten who we are. That's why we have to reconnect. So we've forgotten who we are, and that's why we suffer so much. That's why we go through so many perplexities, because precisely I've forgotten who I am. And I don't know what to do. I don't know the instructions. I don't know what my purpose is. So I just go based on instinct, based on speculation, based on what my mind tells me, which is all circumstantial. If we accept that I'm a soul, I'm not this body, and I've come into the body of, this person born in this place from these parents in this country. There's so many circumstances that are going to affect our decisions. And in that way, our intelligence becomes hijacked and we live a scripted life. And that scripted life often leaves one with a sense of quiet desperation because it's not fulfilling. It's not a very fulfilling life. So the process of the science of spiritual life is precisely in understanding what is the supreme, what is the supreme source, what is the supreme nature, what is the supreme goal, who is the supreme if there's such a thing, and who am I, and what is my relationship with that supreme. So any bona fide spiritual practice has to be able to answer these questions in a viable way, in a way that allows one to have full experience and realization of that, in a way that can purify ourselves, purify the senses so that we can see that. So scientific words for that in Sanskrit, there's this sambandha gyan, knowledge of myself and my relationship with God or Krishna. Abhideya, what is the process by which I can achieve that relationship? What is the process I have to do or to engage in by which I can actually uncover the elusive vision and understand myself in a spiritual position and thus become relieved from suffering? And prayojana, what does that look like once I'm situated in that position? What is the goal? So these are fundamental questions that must be answered. So if your spiritual practice is not answering these questions, or if your speculations are not answering these questions, which they're not, then we're in the dark. We're in darkness. Speculation is not the key also. We can't figure out this stuff with our mind. So we have to understand this science. Evam parampara praptam imam rajasahovadu. Actually, religion is laid out by God. It's described in the sixth canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam by a being called Yamaraj. And he explains that religious principles, not religions, but the principles or the activities or the science behind spiritual life is coming from God. It's coming from the source. And that's why it's so powerful if one comes in contact with it, because it's a science coming from the Lord. And then when I engage in that science, I become fully realized as to what the Lord is, what my relationship with him is. So this is the difference between faith-based religion and experience-based religion. So faith is a necessary stage in the beginning of all spiritual practices. You have to have faith. Even in your science, you have to have faith. One of my good God brothers, he makes this nice point, and I always use it, that the scientists or the atheists, they have faith in the scientists. They're putting faith in the scientists that they're going to solve so many problems and that they're going to fix so many things. And some of that faith is well placed, not going to lie. But spiritual persons, they have faith in saintly people. We have faith in character, not in so-called knowledge. I have faith in the character of this person who is applying this process, and that if I apply this process, I will also develop that character. And if everybody develops this character, which is the character of a spiritually realized person, a person who has factual realization of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, if I engage in that process, then I will also be that way, and other people can be that way, and that will help the human society. So you can place your faith where you like. That's totally your choice. So what is the Supreme? This is where we introduce Krishna. So Krishna says, Aham sarvasya prabhavo mata sarvapavartate iti matva bhajantem bam Buddha bhava samanvita. It's always Jamuna who helps me out with the verses. Thank you. So Krishna is explaining that I am the source of everything, both material and spiritual. Everything emanates from me. So this is the definition of God. God is whom, from which everything emanates. And one who knows this perfectly, if one can understand perfectly the nature of the Supreme Lord, then one engages in his loving service with determination. So that's a fundamental shift of consciousness that happens upon spiritual realization. Once one has a spiritual experience, there's no going back. Now I've had an experience where I know factually that there is a Supreme Being, and I can't be shifted back. I've seen So now I'm engaging in a loving relationship with that being. And that's a different state of consciousness. And that state of consciousness precipitates an immense amount of joy, an immense amount of love. It precipitates the nature of the soul, which is full of knowledge, full of bliss, and aware of its eternity, its eternal nature. So that's how we want to be. We want to be blissful. You have to be yourself. You are a servant of God. You're a soul. Souls are blissful. Bodies are full of misery. So God is not just the source of everything. He's the possessor of everything, the possessor of all opulences. So no one is stronger than God. Krishna is the strongest being. And no one is more beautiful than Krishna. These are all the things that we're attracted to in this world, right? People are attracted to strength. A very strong man, a strong politician. They're attractive for some reason, right? Strength is attractive. Beauty is very attractive. If you see someone very beautiful, you're very attracted to them. So Krishna is the most beautiful. God is the most beautiful person. God is the most strong person, the most famous person. Everybody knows God. Even the atheists know God. That's why they're called atheists. Theos is there in their name. Everybody knows God. He is the most famous person. And his devotees are simultaneously as famous, just like we have Lord Jesus Christ is so famous. All the great spiritual teachers, they're very famous. So knowledge, naturally the Supreme Being knows everything. And he knows what's the most important thing, which is this spiritual science by which the living entities in this world can extricate themselves from suffering. We don't want to suffer. We don't want to have to go through circumstances that cause perplexity, that cause pain, that cause so many difficulties. So, yeah, he's the most full. He's the most knowledgeable. He's the wealthiest. God owns everything. After this human race is annihilated, what remains still belongs to God. Still belongs to Krishna. So Krishna is the wealthiest personality, and he's the most attached. He doesn't really. Your activities don't really affect him. No one else's activities affect him. He's self-satisfied. Krishna is always satisfied in himself, and therefore he's renounced. He's not attached to the mundane activities that go on in this world. So further than that, Krishna is all those things, and Krishna explains he's the source of all things material and spiritual. But why would you believe that? I mean, at this temple, especially, we hear so many people come and they say, actually, I'm God. But you're God, and we said there's one man who came once and he says, I'm God, but actually he wears the same t-shirt every day. I think God would have more than one t-shirt. But actually, no, you're part of God. You're not God. You're part of God. Because if you were God, you wouldn't be suffering. You wouldn't be able to, you can get yourself out of, your debt and your health problems. You can help the people. Okay, maybe I wanted to experience this suffering. Well, at least you can help the ones around you, but you can't. Because you're not the Supreme. That's a relieving thought. Oh, I'm not in charge. But you are part of God, meaning you have the same quality as God. You are eternal, you are full of knowledge, you're full of bliss. God is also those things, but he's more powerful. But just to prove that further, and for our benefit, Arjuna, Krishna's friend in the Bhagavad Gita, he says, let me see your universal form. And so Krishna says, you cannot see that form with your present eyes, therefore I'll give you divine eyes by which you can see my universal form. Behold my mystic opulence. And at that time, Arjuna sees all times, places, and circumstances in one place at one time. He sees everything there is to see imaginable, all happening in one place. And he becomes very frightened. And he goes, please just go back to your Krishna form, beautiful Krishna form. So just to further prove Krishna's position as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So we don't want to stay in this platform of sentimental faith. We don't want to stay on this platform of, I'm just, going to go to the church out of fear, or go to the temple because, I think it may help me in my illusion, right? If we're thinking I'm this body, if we're thinking I'm this mind, if we don't have any spiritual knowledge, then maybe we think there's a God, but we're going to go to God for all material, mundane things like, my dear Lord, please help me to get a good degree. Please help me to find a nice spouse. Please help me to do so many things. This is a very mundane relationship with the Supreme Lord, based on illusion based on sentiment. But when you move out of the sentimental spirituality via the scientific process given by the Supreme Lord to spirituality based in actual spiritual experience, by following that experience, one can know God in factuality. And by knowing Krishna in factuality, one can become very happy. Amaya Shakta Manoparta Yogam Yunjam Marashritaha Asham Shayam Samagramam Yata Gyasyachi Touchtrinu. Krishna says, just here, O son of Pritha, how by engaging in yoga and with full consciousness of me, one can know me in full, free from doubt. So wouldn't that be nice? You can engage in this scientific process of spiritual life. You can know Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, free from doubt. And so that's why, we see that, some people, it's experienced that some people say devotees are very arrogant. But it's not arrogance, because spiritual experience is there. One can have spiritual experience of the personality of Godhead, and that can't be taken away. So, therefore, with mind attached to me, practice this spiritual process. So then there leaves further confusion. Someone may come to the level of, okay, I'm realizing that there is something more. I'm going to go through a process. I'm going to approach the church, the temple, the mosque, whatever. I'm going to go through the process. But now I I had this, this crisis when I was a 10-year-old boy. Okay, there's so many different paths. How do I know, what is the right path? And then we already explained that there's this yogic process, this coming from the Lord, evam parampara praptam, imam rajasaho, coming down. So how do I, what do I do? How do I learn this process? So Krishna in the 4th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, he gives all these different processes, which you see, especially people who approach Eastern spirituality, they see that, okay, let me meditate, let me do my dharma. We hear that word thrown around a lot, dharma. Let me worship. Let me give up everything. Let me practice yoga postures and control my breathing. So all these things are there, and still, it's kind of confusing when okay, now I'm looking in the East, looking at Eastern spirituality. What's the deal here? So then Krishna, he gives a real answer. He says, what's the conclusive way to understand this absolute reality? Tadviri pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya upadekshanti te jnanam jnaninas tattvadarshinaha. Krishna, he explains that just try to learn the truth by approaching a spiritual master. Such a self-realized person can impart knowledge unto you because they have seen the truth. Tattvadarshinaha. So a self-realized spiritual master can impart this transcendental science unto you because they've seen the truth. And in that regard, we have to understand, okay, so now I've understood, I need a guru, I need a teacher. You want to become a doctor, you need a teacher, right? You can't just say I'm a doctor and you'll go to jail. If you want to become a lawyer, you need a teacher. There's no way around this. We can say, well, it's all inside me. Yes, it is all inside you. All the body parts are inside you. You have a heart. Does that mean you know how to work on a heart? You have a brain. Does that mean you know how to do brain surgery? Yes, it's all inside you. Still, you need someone who has walked the path to help you. This is the proper process. This is a universal principle. And it's a principle that first requires humility, which is the first object of knowledge described in the Bhagavad Gita. A knowledgeable person is humble, meaning he's humble enough to admit, I don't know, and I can approach and learn from teachers. So then you should ask, what is a guru? What is a bona fide guru? There's so many gurus. There's computer guru down the road, and then there's car guru up here. There's printer guru down there. I've seen. There's so many different gurus. So what is a genuine guru? And the answer lies, a guru is someone who has a guru. And that guru is someone who has a guru. And that line of spiritual teachers can be traced back to the Supreme Lord. It can be traced back to Krishna. It can be traced back to the beginning of time, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And that science is, that the guru is speaking, is in accordance with the Shastras. Right? So this is the real nature of a guru, a real spiritual master. And so such a person who has understood the science, lives the science, and can propound the science is a bona fide teacher. Just like His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, it comes in the line of the Gaudiya Madhva, Brahma Gaudiya Madhva Sampradaya, going all the way back to Krishna at the beginning of time. And this knowledge is exactly as it was spoken in the beginning, when Krishna spoke in the beginning. All the Shastras confirm this. And so we're getting exactly what the Supreme Lord is saying, and we're seeing practical example of how Srila Prabhupada lived and how his followers are taking those teachings to actually have that spiritual experience. And so one can say, I'm a guru. One can say, I have a guru. So many say, oh, I have a guru. But then they're still in so much perplexity. So what is the result of someone who has a spiritual master? That is, it said, that Yajgita na punar moham evam yas yasi pandava ena bhutan yashesh ani dakshashyatman yato mai. So it's described, having obtained real knowledge from a self-realized soul, you will never fall again into such illusion. So if you actually have real knowledge, if you actually, even we have a guru, we have a bona fide guru, but I'm not taking it seriously enough to actually have the experience of having a guru. Having obtained such real knowledge, that means spiritual knowledge from the Bhagavad Gita, from a self-realized soul, you will never fall down again into such illusion. For by such knowledge, you will see that all living beings are part of the Supreme, or in other words, that they are mine. That's a beautiful vision, right? Rather than seeing black, white, gay, straight, Catholic, Hindu, American, Indian, we can see all living beings are part and parcel of the Supreme, or in other words, they belong to Krishna. And by developing that spiritual love for Krishna, one begins to love everybody. And all those things we hear about humility and kindness and love and charity and forgiveness that we heard about growing up, which we all struggle to do, it become very, very easy for one who chants Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And so Krishna explains, I'll end with this, that what you get in the Krishna consciousness movement is this absolute process by which one can know the Supreme Lord. Krishna says, Janma karma chame divyam evam yo veti tatvata tvaktva deham punar janma naiti mameti so Arjuna. As one who knows the transcendental nature of my appearance and activities does not, upon leaving this body, take his birth again in this material world, O Arjuna, but attains to my eternal abode. So one who understands God, the nature of God, the activities of God, the appearance and disappearance of God, one who understands those things in factuality, in experience, that person does not take birth again. He breaks the cycle of reincarnation. He becomes situated as a fully spiritually realized person and attains to the eternal abode, the spiritual abode. And then Krishna says, lastly, he says, being freed from attachment, fear, and anger, being fully absorbed in me. So how many people want to be freed from attachment, fear, and anger? I'm in. Being freed from attachment, fear, and anger, being fully absorbed in me. That means fully absorbed in love with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Taking refuge in me. Many, many persons in the past became purified by knowledge of me, and thus they all attained transcendental love for me, which is the ultimate goal of life, folks. It's not liberation, not enlightenment. The ultimate goal of life is to have this love in your heart for Krishna. And if you have that love for Krishna, then you love everybody. I promise you that. You love everybody. And so this is what His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, he came across the ocean in 1965 on the order of his spiritual master to bring this knowledge by which one can develop this relationship with the Supreme and have this spiritual experience. Everybody's welcome. It culminates in chanting Hare Krishna, taking blessed food, living a clean lifestyle, very easy process, but at the same time, one who takes it seriously will undeniably and undoubtedly have a very powerful and positive spiritual experience of life. Thank you very much. Are there any questions, comments? Sureshwar Prabhu.
Yeah, it seems like what really sold you on Krishna consciousness was experience, not
Yeah.
just belief or even, I mean, reading the Bhagavad Gita is a powerful experience.
Yeah. Yeah.
But, or not but, and, um, I mean, I've met people, you probably have too, who have also had very profound and real spiritual experiences. So, are they valid?
Yeah. It's not that we can't say that if someone is having a spiritual experience in the Catholic Church or the whatever experience, we can't say we can't deny their experiences. Otherwise, someone wouldn't be doing it. That's the thing. No one's dedicated to a process unless they're having some experience. And so we can validate that experience, because if the principle is present, if someone is devoted to God in whatever tradition they may be in, that principle of bhakti is there, they will have an experience to some degree or another. There's no doubt about it. But is the fullness of that experience there included in the science? That cannot be said yes or no. But we don't want to invalidate anybody's experiences if they're, genuinely devoted to the Supreme Lord. Krishna says, Ye yatam mam prapadyante tam sataiva bhajamyaham, that as they surrender unto me, I reward them accordingly. And I answered your question exactly as Bhakti Vigyan was asked that question. So, but I'll say this, that the big experience for me wasn't just my own personal experience. It was seeing people who were living such an incredible life, like the devotees. That was the best experience, is that, wow, these guys are the people I read about in all the books, all the spiritual books. These are saintly people. And that experience was the most profound, that convincing experience, that they're experiencing something and they have the qualities of a spiritual person.
So Prabhupada's inviting us to have the best experience. It's not that there's just degrees of experience of God.
Yeah, because the whole science is here.
That's not sectarian to say that.
The entire science of Krishna consciousness, of bhakti yoga, is present here. And so one is eligible to have the complete knowledge of the Supreme Lord. Hare Krishna. Thank you very much.